All right, we are live here on YouTube. John Kurtz, Derek Young, K-StateOnline, Grant Flanders behind the camera. Hey, K-State won and beat Texas Tech. Deuce Vaughn did it again. K-State won in spite of a lot of things today, namely losing your starting quarterback in Skylar Thompson. And there is a ton to break down from this game, but to me, Derek, it just feels like you start with K-State had to battle through a lot of adversity once again today, and I know that was kind of a storyline last week when they beat Oklahoma because you fall behind by 21. You were coming off of the Arkansas State game. But here today, man, within the context of this game, you have Skylar Thompson knocked out. You have Cooper Beebe knocked out, which was a huge injury, and that came really early in the game. And I think that in some ways caused perhaps what happened to Skylar Thompson with him getting hit the way that he did.
Right.
But through all of that, with Will Howard playing quarterback and then falling behind in the second half, you still found a way to win this game. And to me, validates obviously what you did against Oklahoma because these guys just found a freaking way to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about last week, Texas Tech had Texas on the ropes, probably should have won that game. They were up by 15 with 3 minutes to go. And Kansas State, had a 14-0 lead at halftime. I think that's what it was, 14-0 at halftime. And they still win this ball game by 10, and they had a lot not really go their way today. The shutout in the first half, even though the defense was, a little rocky in the second half. I think they gave up 3 touchdown drives in a row. It's a good thing they put a stop to it, but they don't get that shutout in the first half. They probably don't win this game. So we can't only dwell on what they did wrong in the second half when they give up those 3 drives in a row, because them getting that shutout in the first half is probably what gave them that margin for error that they needed in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the defense, Chris Kleiman said it after the game, you give up 21 points to Texas Tech, most of the time you'll take that. Now, in fairness, we're doing this from a K-State perspective, and you're thinking about Skylar Thompson. Alan Bowman got knocked out of the game for Texas Tech pretty early on, too.
That quarterback played pretty well.
Yeah, really thought he did. But Texas Tech was dealing with their backup quarterback there as well. And when the defense needed to come up with a play, it did. Jerron McPherson with an interception down near the goal line. And that was a play that apparently was something they had been sitting on for a while and decided to use it, and that was a calculated move that paid off at the right time. So, yeah, I'm not going to be overly critical, really, of the defense at all. And, there were ups and downs in all 3 phases of the game. Special teams, you had a blocked punt for the 3rd straight week. K-State is the first team to do that in the first 3 weeks of the season since 2012 when Memphis did it. So special teams contributed, but it wasn't a perfect day on special teams. You had a weird fake field goal or punt? That was a fake
field goal.
Fake field goal, right, early in the game. I mean, just
Phillip Brooks fair caught a punt.
He fair caught a punt at like the 3-yard line. So, it was not perfect, but all things considered, when at one point in the second half you're looking out there on the field and saying, man, you've got Carver Willis, a true freshman at left tackle. You've got a true freshman quarterback in Will Howard out there playing. And then Deuce Vaughn is the only offense and the guy that's having to carry everything. You'll just take any win that you can get against a team that clearly is capable enough in Texas Tech, and doing it in a year where the Big 12 is pretty wide open right now.
Yeah, and they weren't the only 3 true freshmen that essentially probably played a ton of snaps today. I think they basically, at some point in the second half, they decided they were going to go with T.J. Smith at safety. That's another true freshman, and I think he just tried to blast everyone into a different universe today because there was not a weak hit or an arm tackle from T.J. Smith. He was going to make you know that he just tackled you. I think they had to review 3 of his hits for targeting. They all went his way.
That's an awesome distinction, by the way.
No, T.J. Smith, he made the refs busy because they had to check him for targeting throughout the second half. But Ross Elder probably wasn't as sharp today as he was against Oklahoma. At least he maybe got picked on a little bit. So they just decided to kind of roll with T.J. Smith at safety. So that's like 4 true freshmen that you relied on, more than a snap here or a snap there. That's 4 you really had to rely on because Carver Willis played a good chunk in the second half too. And that's I tell you what, when you talk about true freshmen, it's nothing against Deuce. It's a little bit easier to play running back as a true freshman or wide receiver.
Well, certainly the left tackle, yeah.
Or wide receiver as a true freshman or a corner. But playing left tackle as a true freshman, aside from quarterback, it's probably toughest to play true freshman at left tackle. That's probably the second hardest position on the field to play a left tackle, and they had to do it today. And he at times he seemed like an upgrade over Katori Leviston on the left side. So it's good that he didn't get exposed.
I should mention, too, and should have said this off the top, if you have questions that you want us to answer, just go ahead and comment on YouTube, or you can tweet them to me at JL Kurtz. I'll check the mentions before we're all said and done here.
I got a couple.
let me ask you this, Derek, because I think, to me, I have this written down in my notes when I'm thinking about the adversity and where this game was at one point. I mean, I was not feeling good about things at all when it gets to really when it got to 17-14 and then 21-17. Obviously, you're not feeling very good.
Right.
I mean, to me, the play of the game is Briley Moore's catch and run down the sideline that winds up setting up a touchdown, because it felt like K-State was dead in the water. Will Howard running the offense, they really had not done much at all at that point, other than Deuce Vaughn just going crazy. And you needed something, and Briley Moore, man, that guy has been so rock solid. And after that, he had an awesome touchdown catch early in the game. He breaks loose down the sideline, a play that Chris Kleiman said reminded him of one that he had at Northern Iowa when he was at North Dakota State. I think the play of the game, hands down, was that.
Yeah, well, that one is kind of what changed the momentum back in Kansas State's favor, and it never flipped back to Texas Tech. So it at least changed the game and kind of paved the way to a 10-point victory. Briley Moore, if it wasn't for Deuce Vaughn, was probably low-key maybe player of the game on offense, because, like you said, not only that big grab there down the right sideline that, really should have been stopped, but then Texas Tech kind of fell asleep, and then he kind of showed more wheels than I thought he had, to be quite honest. Like, I knew he could move. I didn't know he could really move that way. It took a while for the corner to catch up to him, so that was pretty impressive. I agree with Chris Kleiman. His touchdown catch earlier is probably pretty underrated. That's a really tough catch. He's catching that ball, between two defenders, and they both put a hurting on him, and they made that, and he had to, hold on to it the entire way. Also, a really good strike from Skylar Thompson, because that's a tight window to deliver the ball. So that's just a tough pitch and catch in general, and they made it look far easier than what it truly was. But, for all the talk that we had about Briley Moore in the offseason, I was starting to wonder, it's like, man, are we getting too much pub to, this FCS transfer? And that's not to talk down to him, but we were really kind of considering him almost, a huge difference maker. And I think...
Well, I think he is. Yeah. I mean, I think he absolutely is.
I thought the expectations for him were going to be tough to meet and exceed, because there were so much being put on him. But he's at least met him. He's probably exceeded him. Yeah,
so right now I'm trying to do math here in my head, because I don't know that ESPN has this, or maybe that is up there. 10 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Does that sound right?
Today?
That seems low. No, that says for the season.
Well, he had 4 catches last week, so maybe.
Okay. The 85 yards seems low, because today he had 78 yards receiving, right?
No, that's really low, so maybe that's not added in today's. Maybe that was the first 2 games combined.
I mean, either way, today he has 2 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. The long one was 66 yards. Yeah, I mean, he absolutely is a difference maker, and it's something the offense just desperately needed. Now, one, I think he can become more important if it is going to be Will Howard moving forward. He's not going to have the same connection that he does, obviously, with Skylar, but you just need easy throws for Will Howard, and it seems like Briley Moore is a guy that can provide some of those.
I know the running game kind of got going a little bit today, but the running game I think will look much better when Nick Lenners is back in there. I love Briley as a pass catcher. Nick Lenners is better in the running game for Kansas State if they want to kind of get back to that. I think he's a little underrated in that department, because you're kind of having to deal with Sammy Wheeler, and I think Connor Fox got a couple snaps here and there, so Nick Lenners is one of the better run blockers in the Big 12. I think that's why for some reason, he got voted as a fullback to the All Big 12 first team last year. So I think he's kind of been a missing piece there as a blocker, and it'll be nice to have him back. And probably even nicer, because if they have to go to Will Howard for any kind of time beyond today, then I think you might want to lean on the running game a little bit more. It'll be nice to have Nick Lenners back.
We do have an update from Chris Kleiman coming up, but I want to go ahead and play Flando the other Chris Kleiman clip here, which is found it very interesting after the game. I mean, he was pretty gassed up about the win, as you might imagine, and he said this win actually was a bigger win than what they did last week at Oklahoma.
I told the guys in the locker room that was as great a win as the Oklahoma game was the week before. This was bigger, because we had to bounce back from a big road win, and we came back and played really well against Texas Tech and found a way to win.
For that actually is somewhat sound, because college football is wild. Upsets happen, especially in COVID year here in 2020. I mean, we saw LSU, Mississippi State last week. There are going to be a lot of those. But you just really validated what you are as a team by coming back and winning this game today, in particular when you win the game when Skylar Thompson gets knocked out and you're dealing with all of these injuries and personnel issues. I mean, to me it does say, I think you can argue this says more about K-State's team than last week's win against Oklahoma did, and I would actually buy that from Chris Kleiman. I don't think that's totally just a coach speak statement there.
Yeah, and to be honest, it was because it's kind of really hard to shift that momentum. I mean, You were up 14-0. You were up 17-7. All of a sudden, you're down 21-17. You got about a quarter left. You're without your starting quarterback. You have a true freshman at quarterback, true freshman all over the field, like we had already said. So I think it also playing into that is just the manner that they had to do it. They had to come from behind again. So really, they've reversed 2 second-half deficits in back-to-back games. They did it against Oklahoma last week. They did it today against Texas Tech. Now today they lost the lead as well. But that just kind of factors into it, how tough this game was. And I think you made a good point, too, and you talked about validating it. Because as much as we want to pretend that's not on the schedule, they did lose that first game at home to Arkansas State. So you kind of did need to still validate that win against Oklahoma. Say, hey, this isn't the fluky, COVID-y, kind of win. Can you do it again? And they certainly did. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to look like a mundane win. Maybe I think it'll look like a decent one even at the end of the year. I know Texas Tech struggled in their first game against Houston Baptist as well. Lost to Texas, but man, they had Texas on the ropes. They really looked like a better Texas Tech team to me than what I've seen the past couple of years out of the Red Raiders. I think they've really taken steps forward.
Yeah, I think they're solid, and I think it's the kind of game that you want to win. And again, all bets are off when you have to play Will Howard at quarterback, and I'll save some of the talk there, but there's just only so much you could do with him offensively. They had to lean on Deuce Vaughn, who's quite obviously the player of the game here today. The numbers are ridiculous. Again, 16 carries, 113 yards, 1 touchdown. That's 7.1 yards per rush. And then in the passing game, he leads K-State in receiving, 3 catches, 81 yards, 1 touchdown. Obviously, he had the 70-yarder there at the end of the game to ice it. I mean, I don't know what superlatives you have left really to describe Deuce. He's the real deal. He's an absolute stud. The way he talks after the game, you can not only tell how much of a student of the game he is, but just how damn mature he is too. I mean, it is incredible the impact that Deuce Vaughn has had on this team already right now.
Yeah, I mean, got to set it all there. I guess I'll just point out they gave up a bunch of stats and records, I guess, after the game. But I want to know when the last time a true freshman for Kansas State led the team in a game in rushing and receiving, both. Because he did that today. He had the most rushing yards on the team and the most receiving yards on the team, 194 total yards. That's one that might not have been done before. I think he's the first true freshman to have 100 rushing yards since Logan Dold.
Which, by the way, yes, that stat could not possibly be more random. The last time K-State had a freshman rush for 100 yards, it was at Texas A&M in 2008. A game between 2 of the worst football teams in college football that year. I mean, just horrendous, wretched teams. Like, I think that's still Gerard Johnson at Texas A&M. I think Ryan Tannehill may have been playing receiver in that game.
Oh,
and Logan Dold was like listen, I love Logan Dold. Good dude.
He's probably listening, man.
Yeah, I know. Good dude. But I couldn't believe that. I felt like, anyway, his career was a little bit mismanaged by Ron Prince. But anyway, that's wild that it's been that long since K-State has had a true freshman making that kind of an impact. And here's the stat line right now in the year for Deuce Vaughn, okay? So he has 44 touches, 439 yards, and 4 touchdowns through 3 games. If you're rounding up, it was like 9.97 yards per touch. So basically 10 yards per touch. It's a first down every time that Deuce Vaughn gets the ball right now.
And he's getting a lot of touches. Like today, did he have 20?
19 today.
20?
Yeah. Or
close to 20. That seems like the top end of what I would want to give him. Maybe exceeded it, but it doesn't seem to bug him. I think there was one point where I was like, oh, his left leg looks a little gimpy, but then he, ran for 70 yards. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, he said after the game, I mean, you had mentioned that, and I thought Tech's defense for a while there, I understand, like, me calling Tech's defense a little dirty. I mean, K-State had, like, 7 targeting reviews today, so, I'm probably on shaky ground saying that. But they were doing some headhunting, and you did wonder about that. But he said after the game when I asked him about his durability and how his body felt, just said, no, I'm sore like normal, but no big deal. Yeah. But I do think there is a concern there and a want for the coaches to it's tough because you get into a game like this where he's clearly the only offense that you have. Sometimes you're going to have to ride him to win games, but I also think there's a balance, there's a tightrope to walk there. Yeah. I got all the Harry Trotter questions, I understand it, but you have to do something to keep him from touching the ball every single play because he's more durable than you'd expect. At 5'5", he's like 168, I think is what he's listed at on the roster. But you still don't. I still do cringe and worry about the durability of him as a true freshman.
Yep. No, I think it's a fair question, and I also understand fans' concern because the Harry Trotter stuff. And you say, well, you can't give Deuce everything. And they're saying, okay, what about Jacardia Wright, right? Everyone, we got a little bit more of him today than what we've seen in the past. I think he completely was vanished in the second half. I'm not sure he was utilized at all in that part of the game, but he did seem more earlier than what we had been seeing him. And he looked fine, actually. He looked better today than he did last week.
Yeah.
He looked like he lost half of the weight I thought he gained, actually. So he looked a little
Wow.
bit, he looked a little bit better in that department. But fans say, why not more Jacardia? Why not more Jacardia? Why not less Harry? And I will say this. I mean, it's been asked multiple times. You're like, why don't you ask this? The stuff about Jacardia and Harry has been asked, but whenever Jacardia Wright's brought up, and you would agree, it's always the answer is something like doing things right or maturity or earning it. So
Yeah.
read between the lines. That seems to be kind of the bugaboo for Jacardia so far.
Yeah, and Harry Trotter was better today. I mean, what's Harry Trotter's stat line here today? Harry Trotter had 12 carries, 43 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, I think the area he's really valuable actually is in the red zone. He's pretty tough in the red zone and is typically pretty good at bouncing off tackles. I mean, he's just never going to break anything big. But it felt like, I mean, the running game overall today, they averaged almost 5 yards per carry, 42 rushes, 198 yards. Like, it seemed like it's making some incremental progress. And I see at least some value in Harry Trotter, especially because they trust him a whole heck of a lot, obviously, and I think he is pretty good in pass protection.
Yeah, and I will say this, and I know it should come down to performance at the end of the day, and I think most of the time it does, but they like to reward the guys that do things right to a point as well. I mean, I think that's kind of their culture thing. You want to get that culture you want, then you have to kind of reward the guys that do things right, and Harry Trotter's one of those guys that does things right. Doesn't mean he should get that preferential treatment and you don't win a game because of it, but I don't know that that's happened thus far, and I don't know that it would happen. But if Jacardia wants to get on that level, then he's got to kind of do those things that Harry Trotter does that this coaching staff likes, because you kind of got to reward those characteristics and traits that you're working for if that's what you want your program to be revolved around. And another thing that I kind of want to say too about Harry Trotter is one of his biggest things today that I liked and kind of shows his value to the team is they had that diamond formation they like. They run those three backs, and when he's the lead blocker in that, he's usually taking someone out. They had a lot of success with him leading the way, running out of that diamond formation. And in terms of the tech and the headhunting stuff, it was kind of a nasty game on both sides. I mean,
I thought so.
They were really physical and kind of skated the lines of physical and probably a little reckless, both teams, I thought. But Chris Climate did say, he called Matt Wells a really classy guy, as classy as they come, and he had no ill will towards the shot that Skyler took.
I want to talk about the game-clinching touchdown there at the end from Deuce Vaughn, because I mean, obviously, it's a phenomenal play, and if you go check out on my Twitter account at JL Kurtz, they put it up on the broadcast, but I just took a video of it. I mean, I thought the aerial view that they had of that was awesome, where you can just see Deuce Vaughn gets matched up on a linebacker and kind of looks over to Will Howard, and they're obviously on the same page there, and he just smokes him, makes one move, and Will Howard dumps it off to him, and that's all that you need. I mean, it's a phenomenal play. I also am pretty astounded that Texas Tech, I get that you would want to bring pressure there, and it's a true freshman quarterback, but I don't know. I'd resist the temptation to do it if I know that the trade-off for that is that I'm going to be putting Deuce Vaughn in space against one of my linebackers, because that was the first thing Matt Wells said on the Big 12 teleconference this week when he was asked about K-State, is that they want to get number 22 in space. I mean, they knew it was coming, and there's something to be said for Deuce Vaughn and K-State to be able to make it happen when they knew it was coming, but boy, I don't know. That'd be a tough one for me to live with if I were a Texas Tech fan. I guess I'll put it that way.
He knew it was coming, and it still struck him a couple of times. I mean, he only singled out one player all week, Matt Wells. It was Deuce Vaughn. He still got 194 yards on 19 touches. So maybe it doesn't matter if teams know it's coming. He's still finding a way to do it. That's 3 games. I will say he has a tough task next week. Probably one of the better defensive minds in the league, and Gary Patterson. And not to look ahead, because I know we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, but maybe having to go with a true freshman starting quarterback. We don't know the Skyler thing. We're not going to know tonight. We probably won't even know tomorrow. But if you have to use a true freshman, I guess the coach you'd hate to go up against first with a true freshman quarterback is probably Gary Patterson.
True, that is. And TCU's typically a very athletic defense. They're going to have some athletes that'll make it, I would imagine, more difficult on Deuce Vaughn than Texas Tech did. But we talk about Deuce Vaughn's maturity all the time. I thought it was crazy. I kind of laughed when he was asked today about his game-clinching touchdown, right? This amazing play, and he has this incredible game. And when he's asked about it, all he says is, one, he gives you a great diagnosis of what happened before the play and what's going on schematically, and then criticizes himself. Here's what Deuce Vaughn had to say.
So we came out and they wanted to blitz, and then I ended up hopping out wide, and they got jumbled up and put a linebacker on me. They had been putting safeties or like nickels on me throughout the game, and then they put 41 on me, who was a linebacker. And right then I kind of looked at Will, and Will kind of looked at me and beat him across his face, and then got to running. And that's just one thing that I'm gonna have to learn to get down before going into the end zone, so we can kneel it down and get out of there, not give them another chance.
I understand that being a teachable moment and a moment for the coaches to be like, "Hey man, take a knee." But like, I don't know, as a fan, I'm just wanting him to house it. Like, just just go house it, dude, and certainly don't beat yourself up about it afterwards. But that is a sign of like who he is as a freshman. He's 18. He's 18 years and 11 months old. I looked it up today because I was like, man, like how old is this dude talking like this? 18 years and 11 months old, and that's where he's at.
What were you like when you were 18?
Not like that.
You would have housed it.
Yeah. I was projectile vomiting all over the Delta Sig bathroom because Todd Reesing was out here on this same field kicking K-State's rear end. That's what I was doing at 18 years, 11 months.
No, it's pretty amazing what he does and his maturity and his response to coaching. That probably comes a little bit with being a coach's son as well. He's just fun to watch. I don't have a problem with him saying that. I know that's your thing. That's how
well, no, I'm not saying there's a problem with it. I'm just laughing at it. I mean, because it's just so exemplary of like who he
just
is.
accepted it.
That's just like, who he is, man.
Because some will be like, "Oh, I shrug it off. Oh, it's cool."
No, it's a great. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's a great sign. It's a great sign that that's who he is as a freshman because he is more mature than juniors and seniors that you'll see in the program.
I like the attention to detail by Chris Kleiman. Like, after all that, Saturday's not even over yet, and he still made sure he's already told Deuce that. Like, it wasn't something that could wait till tomorrow. It's like, no, we're going to take care of this right now.
Right. Yeah. But, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, that play, like, Deuce Vaughn is a certified superstar. All right, so let's talk about the quarterback situation and what's going on here. Skyler gets knocked out of the game. It did feel like a hit that was in some ways retribution for what had happened earlier in the game to Alan Bowman.
Yep.
Very much felt like that. Now, I don't know. I put both of the plays out there on Twitter and said, like, hey, you guys think this was dirty? Seems like there were a lot of responses on both sides. I'll just say this. I thought Khalid Duke's hit was definitely low and definitely late. Does that make it dirty? I don't know. I think it certainly should have been flagged. I don't love it.
Yeah, dirty. I guess dirty is a tough word to quantify because it's in the eye of the beholder. I think most would agree with this term to describe both of those plays: excessive.
Yeah, yes, for sure. And obviously the same thing with the Texas Tech hit as well, just coming flying in like that at Skyler.
But that was a response because after he hit Skyler, he pointed at the Kansas State sideline.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we all know what that is. And now K-State may have to move on without Skyler. I mean, here what we know now basically is that Skyler came back in the second half with a sling on his arm. And I guess here we'll go ahead and just give you the update from Chris Kleiman. He did not really have too much in the way of details on what's going on with Skylar Thompson, but here's what he had to say both about Skylar's status and then the hit in question that led to Skylar being knocked out.
I do not have any update on Skylar other than they said he was just out.
Did you take issue at all with the hit that he took that knocked him out of the game?
No, I mean, it was penalized. And I mean, one thing, Matt Wells is as classy a guy as there is. And so, no, I don't think there was nothing malicious by it at all. It's the game of football.
So Kleiman didn't have much of an issue with what was going on there, which I can understand. Especially no matter what you think, if you're him in that situation when you had a thing happen on the other side, that's probably the smart thing to say after the game, no matter what.
And he hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, right. It's a tough position to be in if you're Chris Kleiman. But, I mean, now you may have to deal with Will Howard playing quarterback. And I will say this. I think the the part that's great about getting through this game is you're like, okay, well, this is a game where Will Howard was not taking number one reps all week. They didn't game plan around him. So that's where you're really kind of handcuffed as far as what you can do offensively. If they have a week to put Will Howard through where he's getting number one reps and game planning, I would feel better about the situation. But having said all of that, I mean, Will Howard handled himself pretty well. I think you could just see that they didn't trust him to do a whole heck of a lot when it came to the offense.
Yeah, they said that he can do more, but they kind of kept it pretty contained, and I think they probably definitely did so once they kind of retook the lead as well, and that probably more play certainly helped with that. At the same time, I do think that if he does play next week, has to play. I like the fact that they can kind of have a full week to prepare him for that, but the other side has a full week to prepare as well, and it kind of worries me a little bit. And you know what coaches like to do against true freshman quarterbacks, right? They like to pressure the crap out of them. And Texas Tech was going to do that, and they did that. And TCU's probably going to do that and even be better at it than Texas Tech. And you're talking about a brand new offensive line. So a lot of those things don't go really well hand in hand. It kind of make me uncomfortable. We don't know that Skyler's even out next week, though, so I should clarify that. It's an arm injury. That's the most I've gotten in terms of any information, breaking, whatever you want to call it, beyond what Chris Kleiman has already shared. It's an arm injury. I think some people wanted to say it was a shoulder issue. Maybe it is, but I've heard it's more arm and maybe not as serious as once thought, but we probably won't know those details until Sunday, Monday.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and take some questions because there are some related here to the quarterbacks. Black E-Mob, does Will Howard do anything better or on par to Skylar Thompson? I mean, it's a tough question for me to answer. I mean, I think in raw ability, he definitely has, more arm talent. Is that fair to say than Skylar Thompson?
We probably haven't got enough sample size to really know, but if you kind of look back at what he is as a prospect, I think there's probably more upside in the arm talent.
Yeah, but right now, Skylar's a fifth-year senior, and he's a true freshman that didn't have spring ball. Like, I just thought it was a glaring example of how different the offense is when Skylar is out. I mean, to me, I know that they won the game, and Will Howard did some really nice things. I think he's going to be a really good player, but today was a shining beacon of light to me that said, like, hey, man, Skylar should be appreciated more because the offense changed a whole lot. I mean, I think K-State wins the game pretty easily today if Skylar Thompson stays in because the offense was playing well. Skylar was playing really well. I mean, that ball that he put on Malik that was dropped in the end zone was a great pass. He threaded the needle and bulleted one in there to Briley Moore. Like, Skylar was playing a really good game. And, I mean, I'm a Skylar guy, but I'm continuing to build up this case. Like, guys, his wide receiver core was quarantined until like 3 days before they actually kicked off the season. He had an offensive line down to a third-string center in that first game. Maybe that's the reason some of those throws were just a bit off. He continues to show better pocket presence. He had a throw in the first half today where just immediately felt pressure, slid, set up his feet, stayed in the pocket, made a nice throw. Skylar's a pretty good quarterback, and I think you saw just how different the offense becomes when he's out.
I would agree, and I will say the funny thing is, I did look and try to look at similar numbers between the two, and at one point I said, hey, Will Howard's 5 out of 8 for 96 yards, and Skylar Thompson was 5 out of 10 for 33 yards. Different points of the game, different things were happening. I do agree, Skylar plays, then you might win that game more comfortably, although the defenses really were playing them anyways in the second half, so I don't know if it looks much different. I will say Will Howard ended up with almost 200 passing yards, and he played a quarter and a half, or did he play the full second half?
It was full second half, yeah.
He played the full second half,
Yeah.
and he almost had 200 yards passing. He was helped out by Deuce yards after catch and Briley Moore's yards after catch as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it was just a lot of really short throws. They were not asking him to do a whole lot. And the other thing I will say, too, and for Skylar, and they haven't used it as much because he's been kind of beat up already this year, but he's got a lot more pop when he's running the ball than Will Howard does. I mean, that's one thing you saw. Like, Will Howard's just not a really explosive athlete on the run. He moves well enough to do some things, but there's a little bit of a crease. He just doesn't hit the hole with the same kind of explosion. So that's another element that you lose.
Yeah, and if they have to go to Will Howard, they're going to have to be willing to take vertical shots next week.
So Hazen asks, is Briley Moore legit 6'4"?
Oh, I think so. He might be taller than that.
Yeah, I mean, he says, so my God, what an athlete. He is absolutely an incredible athlete. And that speed is something that I didn't expect quite as much of. Like, I knew he was really good, but he really turned on the jets on that run down the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we got. We did have a we had a question about Jacardier Wright here.
Yeah.
Ran hard early. Is he not a threat to catch the ball? They used Jacardier Wright in the passing game.
Yeah, well, I've never seen him involved in passing game dating back to last year, so maybe that's another aspect of it. But you have enough pass catchers out of the backfield that I don't think it's really keeping him from playing, if that's really the question.
I'm seeing. I know we kind of addressed the Harry Trotter stuff. Like I guess one question I would throw at you, DY. I'm not seeing it specifically here, but I know you talked a lot about Tyler Burns before the season.
That's
he's just MIA
surprising.
right now.
It's not as surprising that Jacardi is not playing. It's not as surprising that Harry's playing as much as he is. It's not as surprising that Deuce is even taking off. The biggest surprise of maybe the entire offense, right? The whole year, the biggest surprise on offense is how little Tyler Burns has been used.
I think I would just say Deuce Vaughn, but if you're talking about beyond
general,
that,
yeah.
probably I just didn't expect Deuce to be this. The way, if you want to phrase it as the way the running back room is shaped up, that's been a big surprise.
Yeah, and I guess we'll kind of stay on the surprise train a little bit. Maybe it takes us in a different direction, and maybe it'll be a question as well in there. But another surprise is just Malik Knowles continuing to not be productive.
I'm seeing a question here about the Big 12 at large. OU battling with Iowa State. UT lost. Is this the lowest the conference has been since when? You may disagree with me on this, Derek. We'll see. But I made this point to somebody earlier, and this was actually before K-State's game today. I get that everyone wants to jump on the Big 12 being down. I still think the Big 12, you have to keep in mind, started playing earlier than most other major conferences, than the SEC for sure, which I think is the big comparison point here. We saw LSU get rocked by Mississippi State in week 1. I still think you'll see a lot of upsets in the SEC.
LSU struggling with Vanderbilt this evening.
Yeah, man, I just don't think. The point I would make is, listen, it's COVID college football, guys.
Yeah.
It's as much as we want to pretend that this is normal, and I think a lot of pundits out there and people in the national college football media have wanted to treat it like it's a normal year and as normal as possible and analyze it like normal. And I get why you do that and why you want to do that, because nobody wants to hear you sit here and say, well, COVID and they had guys out and all that. But that's the reality. So I think it's going to make it tougher to run through a conference unbeaten. I think it's going to create more parity and just more wild games that happen. And I guess what I'm saying is I don't think the Big 12 is as unique as everybody wants to make it out to be right now. Much like I said after week 1 when they lost those games to Sunbelt teams and everyone's burying the Big 12. Guys, I think you're going to see similar things in other conferences this year. Yeah. Is the Big 12 down a notch? Yeah, because Oklahoma doesn't have an experienced quarterback, and they're down a little bit, and they're the only team that carries this league to the playoff anyway, ever.
I called that.
But you combine all that together, that's what you have. You have the Big 12 slightly down, but in a COVID pandemic environment that's going to get everybody. That's my take on it right now.
No, you nailed it. But I'm just going to brag and be like, I know it's early. Oklahoma could still go, 9-1 or whatever. But I said that Oklahoma was going to be down this year, and I think it's fair to say that they're probably down. Even if they go 9-1, they're not the team that we have been accustomed to seeing. Some of that is because they have a true freshman quarterback. Some of it is because they don't have as many dudes. Really, I remember I banged on the running back a little bit, but their running backs are fine. Their wide receivers are actually worrying me.
So here's Black Ema asked about Malik Knowles.
Don't love it right now.
It's not very good.
He's been a disappointment. I guess I'm not going to kind of dance around it anymore. I guess in the past few weeks I've said he just has to be better. But how many weeks in a row do you have to say that? I think this makes Cole has the stat. I think this is 8 out of the last 13 or 14 games Malik Knowles has played, he's had 1 catch or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's each of the 3 games this year he's had a drop. Now I know,
big one.
You can say what you will about Skylar's throw being a little bit behind him against Oklahoma last week, but it was certainly a catchable ball. And then there's a ball that he drops against Arkansas State that would have been a huge gain, if not a touchdown. And then today there's a drop in the back of the end zone. It's not the easiest catch in the world, but it was a tremendous throw on 3rd down, and it was definitely there to be caught. And Malik Knowles has the talent to be, definitely a number 1 receiver on this team, and it's just not clicking right now.
The only argument I would have is I thought that was an easier catch today. Like, that ball's right there. He's got a defender on his back. The ball's put in the money positions. It was put in. Oh, he got it over the. I don't know if it was a corner or a safety there, and away from the other defender. That's a perfect ball. You have to show up for your quarterback when he delivers a ball as pretty as that. In the first week, Skylar had issues with ball placement at times, throwing it to the wrong shoulder to Knowles, I think, once. Overthrew Knowles one time when he made the one-handed grab, and then wrong shoulder to Taylor. But there was also a pretty throw from Skyler that game you talked about against
Yeah.
Arkansas State where the ball was on the money and he just dropped it and it was a post route. The one last week is probably a little bit more difficult to complain about Knowles on, but I mean, we're talking what I just rattle off 6 or 7 different throws where he just didn't cash in. So I don't know. At some point, when do you say this is who you are? I'm kind of there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, and listen, I am as big a Malik Knowles fan as anybody out there.
He's
I mean,
fun. Yeah.
When he is rolling, he is really fun, and he has such high level athleticism. But yeah, we're 3 games in, and there are not great signs of life as far as that is concerned right now.
Sebastian Taylor is this team's best receiver right
Yes,
now.
correct.
And it's not really that close at the moment. The thing is Joshua Youngblood was not at Bill Snyder Family Stadium today. And
That's true.
That's really all we know. Wyking Gill got injured. I know we were going to touch on injuries a little bit more. I could talk about that one at least now. I don't know when Wyking Gill is going to be back, and I think it's going to be a prolonged absence from him. And we don't know what's going on with Youngblood. So, really, I know we just spent the last 4 or 5 minutes saying, Malik Knowles, why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? They just need him to be better because they're kind of running out of alternatives a little bit.
Yeah. The Josh Youngblood thing was very surprising. And, if you would have told me K-State would have wins over Texas Tech and Oklahoma without getting basically anything from Malik Knowles or Josh Youngblood, I would have said you were crazy. But
Right.
that's how this year has worked out so far. So
On the flip side, I think Phillip Brooks is underrated.
yeah, Phillip Brooks is rock solid.
Yep.
Rock solid. The injury bug did bite pretty hard today, and I saw some questions in there about what the option is at tackle right now. So I guess DY, I'll just leave it up to you what you want to say about what you know about Cooper Beebe and then the play of Carver Willis and Katori Leviston and what the options really are. I mean, Logan Long wasn't available either. That's another thing that's hurting him.
Yeah, Logan Long should be back for the next game, and that'll help. Obviously, Katori Leviston was still having his, bout of struggles, so to speak, and they didn't have Cooper Beebe to lean on, and that's why they went to Carver Willis at left tackle. And it wasn't terrible for a true freshman, really. He hung in there. And Cooper Beebe, how will he miss any more? His is not like an extended absence kind of type of injury. That's what I will say. It's not like the Wyking Gill one, which, you kind of wonder if we're going to see Wyking Gill again this year. That's how serious his is. Cooper Beebe's is not on that level, but I don't think it's a slam dunk that he plays next week against TCU. But there's probably a chance he could. That one's probably going to be close. And then Wyking Gill,
Justin Gardner was another one.
And I don't have any information on that, but I think we could both agree that didn't look good the way he came off the field because he couldn't put any pressure on whatever leg plagued him or whatever he injured. And Skyler is really, I know we know what he is hurting at, but we don't know how serious that is. So the only one I feel good about having any kind of certainty is Wyking Gill. There's no way he's playing next week.
Yeah, and I guess the good thing and a way to put a bow on this conversation where things are at right now is that if you are going to be dealing with a bunch of injuries and some personnel issues, you do have the best stretch on your schedule right now to be dealing with that coming up.
Yeah, TCU is better than we thought.
TCU is, and especially with Max Duggan. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
the key there. Max Duggan back, which it didn't – they were talking about him being out for the year just a couple of weeks ago.
Yep. Flano at TCU last in the Big 12.
I remember telling you guys, I was like, listen, Gary Patterson's going to scheme up a defense that'll get him 5 wins no matter what. That'll be tough. But then you have Kansas and West Virginia, and there's a bye week in there before Kansas also. So, I mean, you have a manageable portion of your schedule here, relatively speaking, to the rest of it. But I'm also not going to – I am not going to allow myself to really start talking about like a Big 12 title like Arlington talk yet because there's still just so much to be sorted out, and I still think now I'll tell you this.
Does it have to be 5-0? Like because we talked about this, we started 1-0 against Oklahoma. You didn't expect that win, so if they can go through and beat was it Tech, TCU, KU, West Virginia? Do you feel good if you start 5-0?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely talk about it at that point.
Okay, well, that'll be the deal. You guys want to talk about the Big 12 championship? We got to get to 5-0 first.
Absolutely. I mean, heck, if they win next week at TCU, all right, like maybe we can start having that conversation. Some of it too, to me, honestly, depends on what we find out about Skyler.
Yeah.
I mean,
what sucks too is like I think Baylor kind of found it out today, but that West Virginia trip for anyone this year is just so wonky because it's already kind of a tough trip to make for anyone because it's weird to get to Morgantown and now add in COVID and the travel stuff that each team has to go through when they do hit the road. Like, it's not easy for them to travel right now. Like, it's a challenge for them to travel, but it's a little bit easier to bus to Ames or to bus to Norman than to do whatever you got to do to get to Morgantown. So that game is probably a little bit more complicated this year than it typically would be. Add on top of that, West Virginia has the Cats number.
Yeah, true. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to close up with?
I did have a couple questions in my Twitter. How much change do you expect from the offense with Messingham at the controls to set up Howard for success in comparison to Skylar? Well, for one, we don't know how much time, if any, that Skylar will miss, but I think you probably got to tighten things up a little bit. Like, he doesn't have the entire playbook at his disposal like Skylar would. So, but I guess, it kind of depends on what the defense gives them and how the offensive line's shaking out. It's going to be tough to put a game plan together. It will be.
Yeah, I mean, I would, my instinct again is to go back to like maybe the last quarterback run. There was still some of that today, but I think a lot of that is just like you have to have some kind of threat other than just give it to Deuce Vaughn every single time. And that's kind of the offense that they've been running with some zone read and read option stuff. I mean, I'm sure it will be different, but I think the best answer I can give you is it'll just be simplified. It'll be scaled down.
I think they're going to have to because I think some games are going to be tight, and you're going to kind of see the difference between the backs. And some of it's hope, I know. And I like Harry Trotter a lot. But with a true freshman quarterback, you really need a running game to help him out, especially since he's probably more of a play-action type quarterback because he's not as mobile. And to take those shots, you kind of need play-action. So you need a running game. Deuce is not the more traditional running back, of course, but he's going to make his plays, but not in the traditional running game. Harry Trotter has had his struggles with the traditional running game. I think Jacardi Wright has to become a big part of this team and what they do going forward after this game, which is a weird thing because he hasn't really been involved much. But I think he's almost the key going forward if Will Howard has to be the quarterback for any extended amount of time.
Well, I would love to see it. I mean, look, I know I defended Harry Trotter today. In a perfect world, Jacardi Wright would get everything figured out. And, he obviously has higher upside. Anybody can see that. But there are a lot of things, I know it's kind of a lame answer, but there are a lot of things behind the scenes that we don't see and we don't know. And I still, these coaches aren't stupid, right? I mean, we're seeing how they're utilizing young guys and letting a ton of young guys play today. And Kleiman talked a lot about that. And so they understand the value in that. Mm-hmm. This is not like Bill Snyder holding somebody back where there was always the frustration of you're holding someone back for these dumb reasons. I think this coaching staff has earned enough credibility with me for me to say I think they know what they're doing as far as that is concerned.
I do too. Well, I think they might be forced into that move. I mean, you just have to have a standard running game with Will Howard your quarterback. I feel like I don't think Skylar is seasoned enough and was enough of a running threat himself that you can kind of piece together things for the offense without a traditional running game. I don't know that you can do that with Will Howard at the helm yet because he's so green.
All right, you have anything else?
I think that's it for me. We got through all those questions.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody that hung out in the chat here and watching us on YouTube Live. Everybody on Twitter as well. Flando doing great work back behind there with a backwards hat. What is that hat, by the way?
It's your team.
Oh, the Nuggets. All right. Go Nugs. Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else for Derek Young, I'm John Kurtz. This is where you say tell your friends.
Tell your friends, yeah. Hey.